What's that?
I don't know.
Oh, I just want to have the Jabber up.
Oh, okay, you open the Jabber.
Yeah. It'd be good if somebody else were also, but it'd be good if other people, it'd be good if you had someone else in the Jabber too, because and as usual, if anybody want to volunteer to take notes, anybody want to volunteer to monitor the Jabber room? Everybody looks down.
Did you see this?
Oh, busted.
It's a pen without a pen.
Maybe it's broken. All right. Hey, Ronnie. Surely somebody must have the ability to take notes.
To enter the Etherpad and not on the Etherpad.
Yeah, just on the Etherpad and nothing major, just decisions.
I'll do it.
All right. Who was that? Said that? All right, good. All right, and I'll monitor the Jabber. And if anybody wants to look over his shoulder to catch where he misses something in the Etherpad. Great. All right, I think we can probably start. I think I see most of the people we need. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Avtcore. So our note takers, we've got a note taker back there. I'm monitoring Jabber, but everybody else wants to monitor Jabber. Also, you're not taking an Etherpad, right?
Yeah, I'm using.
Great, perfect.
So anyone can join the Etherpad.
Anyone can join the Etherpad. So blue sheets are going around, or possibly have already gone around. I see one sitting up at the front, so if you didn't get one, come get one. All right. We recorded on Metaco. Note well. This is the last session of the week, so hopefully you've all seen this already. If not, welcome to the IETF. Agenda. So Rachel is not here. She is switching roles at her current at Huawei, so it's not clear she'll be able to be coming to the IETF, or I think it is clear that she will not be able to be coming to the IETF anymore. So probably want to talk to Barry about that at some point if he still thinks we need 3 chairs.
Did she confirm that to you, that she won't be coming in the future? Because when I last
We
talked,
need to talk with her and figure out.
okay, yeah, because when I talked with her, she wasn't certain yet
Okay.
what the future would be. She knew she couldn't come now,
Yeah. All right.
but
Yeah.
so the three of us should talk with her at some point soon.
Okay, that sounds good. So we do have one agenda bash. Colin needs to be in another working group, or actually research group, for the beginning of the session. So we're moving his to later. That's what happens when he's IRTF chair. He needs to be at the IRTF sessions. Amazing how that works. Other than that, you see we've got the VVC presentation and real-time text for multi-party conference as well. So that's what we've got up on the agenda. Our working group documents, 3 of them are still in the cluster 238, so that'll come out whenever that comes out, and we're not stressing about it. One is waiting on frame marking, so hopefully we'll get that resolved today. And then multiplex guidelines. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah. So the open, we did, as one of the, here I'm speaking as one of the authors of the document, or the editors, and We missed during the process to address Bernard's comment, and hopefully I will do it next week, so I'll probably have to ask probably from Bernard for some clarification, but I'll try to do it next week. And the last one, the feedback, CC feedback message, that's the one that Colin is going to present when he comes in. Next slide.
Left, not down.
Okay.
So frame marking, Mo, do you want to speak to this?
Mo Zanotti is editor of frame marking. So we updated to version 10 based on Dale's substantial feedback. Let me preface this with it was quite a bit of quite a few comments, and I think several of them required some substantive changes. So unfortunately, I think we do need to go through another working group last call to make sure that those changes are okay with everyone. I'll summarize them briefly, but I think people are going to need some more time to digest it and make sure that we're not breaking anything with these changes. So the first major item was, and I guess Ronnie, you should pay attention to this, the 4 reserved bits that used to be in the short format, where the temporal layer ID and the base layer sync bit were. Those bottom 4 bits were all zeros in the short extension format. And since we added the ability to omit in the long format the other parameters, that made it ambiguous whether something was TID 0 with B equals 0, or whether something was a non-scalable header extension where you should ignore those. So it's really not possible to reserve them for future use, which Ronnie's draft was relying on them being available for future use for the non-scalable extensions. Only if you knew that beforehand, that you're only ever going to use non-scalable streams through some other signaling, you knew that there was only non-scalable streams. That's the only time you can really reuse those bits. If you had a case where there could be scalable and non-scalable streams, then there's no way you could reuse those bits because there's no way to distinguish the two. So this current version explicitly says that those bits are always 0, and they're not available for future use for non-scalable streams.
Yeah, John, thanks. As an individual, I'd say that's, if you do need to change the semantics of some bits, you probably want to put something in the signaling anyway. So that's probably, you map it to a different, you'd either negotiate a different header extension or.
Right. I mean, the easiest thing is just to have a different URN or a URN parameter after frame marking. But I mean, that's essentially a different header extension. It'll have a different header extension ID, so you could differentiate them that way. But that essentially is a different header extension at that point. So if Ronnie wanted to pursue the priority work, it would just have a different URN than frame marking, and you could reuse those bits. But with the base URN that's specified in frame marking, it wouldn't be advisable to reuse those bits unless somehow the application knew that there's no chance of scalable streams coming in this. The next point was in the case where you're in the base temporal layer 0, the B bit, which is base layer sync, is sort of useless because you're obviously in the base layer, so everything only depends on the base layer. And Dale pointed out that it was an oddity that the B bit would always need to be 1 in that case because you only do depend on the base layer. But in other cases, we say that the B bit is 0, for example, for non-scalable streams. So to clean that up, I just forced the B bit to always be 0 when the TID is 0. That way, it's clear that the natural case is when something is ignored, it's 0. So then you don't have to always set it to 1 in the base layer. It's just always 0 in the base layer. So that seems a little bit cleaner. That's a substantive change. And the next change is TL0 pick index. The current draft, the older draft said that it counts the TID equals 0 frames, and that's not completely accurate. It has to be the combination of TID equals 0 and lid equals 0. So it's basically the base layer, not just the temporal base. So clarified that it's both TID 0 and lid 0 that that labels the TL0 pick index. Next change is that if you don't have a TID, it's implicitly 0. So basically, non-scalable streams are flat, and they only have that simple base temporal layer 0. And similarly, lids are implicitly 0 when you're using the short extension. So if you don't specify it, you're in the base spatial layer. And if you omit it in the long extension, same thing. It's implicitly 0. So just added some text to clarify that. That's not substantive. That's just clarification. Layer ID mappings, that's also just clarification. It wasn't obvious to some other readers that if you have a non-scalable stream, there's no layer IDs, and so there's no mappings. Clarified that in this draft. And then finally, the editorial change just to not show the header extension ID with a specific value. It was marked with a specific value in some of the sections, and it should be a question mark that's negotiated by signaling. That's all it changes. But I think we do have to go through another work group last call to everybody to digest those.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination would be to say like the first 2 weeks of December, so it's after the Thanksgiving holidays for Americans and before the Christmas holidays.
Bernard Abova, Microsoft. I have just a clarifying question for you, Mo, because the frame marking draft is relatively simple to implement. It's attractive to play with for things like AV1. And the question has arisen as to which modes of AV1 it is applicable for. So my take, and tell me I'm wrong or not, is that it applies for the temporal modes and the normal kind of spatial modes, but not for the KSVC or key shift modes or any of those weird things, or the simulcast of one. Am I wrong?
I'm surprised you're asking that, Bernard, because I think you're well aware that the promoters of AV1 are not actively binding to this specification. So if people wanted to go outside of what AV1 specifies and bind to this specification, yeah, the cases where you have nested temporal hierarchies would be usable by this, but that's kind of is difficult to say whether or not we should recommend and have a section for AV1 about this, because first of all, there is no AV1 RTP draft, not an IETF draft for that, and if there ever were one, it's my understanding is it's likely not to specify a binding to frame marking. It would have its own type of descriptive marks.
I mention this because frame marking is currently in LibWeb RTC. And so when AV1 is added in, you have to figure out what do you do with it. Even if we don't mention AV1, just understanding what kinds of modes, because some of these modes also exist in VP9, just understanding the applicability.
Well, we have a draft.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. Do we have a slide for that for VP9?
Just mentioned this.
So anyway, thank you.
It's in progress.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, as far as I understand, that for the frame marking for any new codecs which are not part of this document, they need to be specified elsewhere because we are closing this one. So if you need for AV1, you need some place to write it in.
Yeah, that's correct. It's just the mode question comes up for VP9 as well. So just having a clear understanding of which modes it's applicable to, it would just be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the VP9 draft does mention its frame marking mappings in it, but again, I think frame marking is pretty clear that it's only for these simple and common scalability structures. And, all codecs can do weird things. Only difference is how easily can they describe them. but they can all be weird, and frameworking is only for the things we thought were the simple cases when we were writing it.
Yeah, it's just helpful to give an example of modes, because a lot of things look weird to a lot of people. And just the question is where the boundary is.
I mean, would you want text in this document saying, here are some examples of things that are specifically out of scope and not supported by this marking? And must
Yeah,
not use
I
if
mean,
you're doing this?
Yeah, I mean, as an example, there are, we have this now standard nomenclature to describe the modes. And so you could say like KSVC modes or key shift modes are not supported, and normal temporal and spatial modes would be, something like that.
Oh, looks unhappy.
I mean, given that those are just, just recently within a few months, mentioned and not, widespread deployed. So I'd be a little averse to starting to enumerate things that are newish, because that list could be, arbitrarily long. And if they never see deployment, then it's kind of, irrelevant that we mentioned those things. I think it's cleaner, and we don't want to enumerate things and then have someone say, oh, well, you didn't enumerate this, so it must be in scope. So it's kind of ambiguous whether or not something that's not enumerated, is in or out of scope. So I think it's cleaner just to say only these very, very well-defined streams are in scope and everything else is out of scope.
I mean, you cannot predict what will happen, so that's why we have either this or we make a new definition for frame marking, like you suggested. We may need a different structure, a different header extension for a specific one. So, but we don't have to decide it now, because now we are closing based on the current text that there is a current codex that's out there.
Yeah, so it sounds like that. Are we good if we just, acknowledge this to ourselves, but don't put text in the draft describing these things, and think of the current text saying we only describe the cases. The cases we do handle. Does it explicitly say must not use if doing something weird? I mean, maybe frame marking should explicitly say must not use if you're doing something that doesn't match these patterns, but.
I don't think you have to prohibit it. It just won't be efficient. Right? It won't blow up your network or anything. It just won't be efficient.
The worry is that, if you're...
It depends what the wrong thing is.
Yeah.
If you forward too much stuff, it'll just waste bandwidth, but it won't cause stuff not to render. If you don't forward the right stuff, yes, it won't render.
Mosinati, it's explicitly stated in that scalability structure section that it is not recommended for other complex or irregular scalability structures.
Do we want to say not recommended, or do we want to say must not?
I mean, it's the creator of the structure knows better than we do whether or not it would work with frame marking. So I think to actually prohibit it would be the wrong thing. If I'm creating a complex structure, but I'm clever enough to make it work the same as nested structures, then I shouldn't be prohibited from being able to use the frame marking, approach. But I could go either way on it. I prefer to leave the text as is, not recommended, but I think must not is a little too strong.
All right, I'm seeing nods in the room for not recommended. Don't see any contradiction, so okay, let's leave it as it is. All right, so yeah, so and it can be addressed if anybody objects. We'll do it in working class call. All right, so yeah, so I think probably whatever it is, like the week after, we'll start like the week after Thanksgiving and go for 2 weeks.
Sure.
All right, great, thank you.
December 1st is Sunday. So.
Okay, yeah, so it depends on whether you mean your week or my week.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, we should decide which of us is issuing that, but okay. All right, so yeah,
Okay, so we have, since we merged up, still give them as an X payload document. So we have in the ISG TSVCs, there's still an open issue, an open discuss, and about the relationship to the TSV sys document and need to be addressed. The TTML, just this week, they put the 06 version, which addressed the comments, and it's now already it went also already to the RFC editor. So this one is finished. It's the ISG. It already will be in the RFC editor. It's new for this week. At the other working group,
On the first one, the status there is where the authors are waiting for the AD to respond, correct?
I'm not sure. I think I'll have to look it back. Because my understanding is that there was the issue about how it's related to internally into the text that's in the TSV and is pointed for that. Is it a normative reference, informative, what to do with it, or to include the text? I think that's the point that is open there.
Right.
I will go back.
But I think the last message was from the author.
Okay.
And it's waiting for an AD response, I think.
Okay.
And if I'll double check
Okay.
that, and if it's so, I will beat on the AD this afternoon.
Okay. So the working group documents we have. Tetra, the payload was registered by a group from Etsy during our cycle. The author submitted the 03 version. It's ready for working group last call. I'll just check with the authors, and if they're okay, then we'll do a working group last call. The JPEG XS, there were comments on the list, and the author addressed them in the 02 version. We need more reviews. I will again ask on the list and ask them also to get reviewers, because sometimes the reviewers are coming from outside our regular community. VP9, here we have the VP9.
Okay, yeah, so I did a minor refresh, and I think there was a one minor update, but it's still basically waiting on a bunch of informative text, which I was hoping that my co-authors would write, and they haven't. So it might be that we need to find some other volunteer to write that text. Just sort of like an overview of how the VP9 codec as a whole works. I mean, this has been deployed in production for several years now in the Chrome browser. So having this as an individual still as an ID is slightly embarrassing. So so I guess we should probably.
So look, I don't know, but just publish whatever you have. Yeah, I don't think you need explanatory text about how a codec works when there is actually sample code that's in production for years.
Yeah, I mean, I
just get that.
Yeah, I mean, I
out
guess
of the door.
my only concern is if there's stuff in the payload header which you actually need for.
Depends. I mean, if you're referencing a document that's got the information.
That's true.
So if you're referencing a document that include the information and you just point and say go read there, that's okay, because mostly if it's informative, if it's not something that you need in order to use the payload or to understand the payload, not the payload, the RTP payload. Okay, so that's just verify that, and if there's no issues with that, then we can do a working plus call and finish with that. Okay, so that's okay with that.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll just probably go and yes, it'll be a little sparse in terms of descriptions of VP9, but better than a perpetual ID.
So this was a conversation not between the two chairs, but between the chair and the author. So as an individual, just to be clear. So the last one, there's a new individual draft, the RTP payload smart for the VVC coding. It will be presented later. Okay. We have to go back to the goals and milestone and see that what to need to update. But currently we have the Tetra, it's already past due. The RTP header extension for video frame. Hopefully we'll have by January or February we'll be able to send it for publication. So we'll need to update this date. That's this June 2019. That's the draft for Colin. Hopefully he's done. We'll hear about it when he does his presentation. Because we were asked why it's not finished yet, and it's mostly because Colin is trying to still add some text to add to that. VP9 we discussed now. We'll update the milestone. The JPEG-X we still have time with it, and the TTML is already done, so we have to just change it to done. Okay, I think this was the last slide from yeah.
I think so. Anything else before we start the individual presentations?
So we start first.
VVC, I guess, because we're still waiting on Colin to get back. Oh wait, sorry, this one, that one. Oh, Colin's here. Excellent. So we can unbash. We can unbash.
Colin,
Did you suck in?
I snuck in.
Yeah.
It was longer than I expected.
Well, as we had to do. Yeah. Well, we had to do frameworking.
One thing before,
Yeah.
so before you go on to the specific stuff,
Mhm.
I mean, unless anyone here is living in a cave, I'm sure that they're well aware that there's a lot of energy around new transport formats and potentially media over those new transport formats, and whether or not it uses the same, formats as AVT has defined or not is still an open question. So if anybody here is not aware of that, I strongly suggest you follow the quick work and the RIP work and all of that,
Yeah, so
and figure out whether or not you have some comments about it.
I understand that Colin Jennings is planning to create a mailing list for RIP as soon as he comes up with a better name for it, so he knows what to name the mailing list.
You will make sure that this will be kind of.
Yeah, I'll make sure that we'll make sure that when this is announced, it's also announced on the AVT mailing list.
Okay, hi, I'm Colin Perkins. I want to talk about RTP congestion control feedback. So the draft content, technical content has not changed in the slightest in this revision. There have been precisely 3 updates, one of which is to fix Michael Romalo's contact details, one of which is to mention the RAMB format along with my mind's blanking, timber and that sort of thing. The other is to add a paragraph which discusses the relation with the Holmer draft. And essentially all this points out is that the Holmer draft adds an RTP header extension to give a per packet sequence number and then reports that as a sequence number for the aggregates in the reports. And this uses the sequence numbers which are already in the packets and reports the SSRC and the per flow sequence numbers. And it just points out the obvious thing that if you're adding a per packet sequence number, this adds you overhead per packet, but simplifies the reporting if what you want to do is congestion control the aggregate. And the approach in this mechanism has less overhead per packet, but has slightly more complex reporting and makes it easier to congestion control the individual flows. And perhaps also integrates better with the rest of RTP, which also reports sequence numbers per SSRC. So hopefully this is a sufficiently neutral description of the trade-offs and will not cause great objections. Hopefully that addresses the action item I had to clarify the relation between these 2 drafts. With that, I believe this draft is ready for working group last call.
I see some nods on that. Anybody disagree with that? We should figure out the timing of this so we're not running too many working group last calls at once, but what'd you say?
I don't see any problem.
You don't see any problem? What? Just yeah, basically, I guess we could do them both. Or I mean, the same considerations apply. We want to avoid, the holiday season, I think, but unless we think
we get about a fortnight between holiday seasons, right?
Yeah, so I guess, but so probably overlapping this with frame marking is fine. I don't think neither of them are terribly long, so I don't think either of them will require.
Yeah, and this has been bashed upon quite a lot, so I think my guess is that anyone who wishes to comment has already done so.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I guess make sure this goes to RMCAT as well as Avtcore.
Yes.
So on the prior note about the new transport formats, thank you, Colin, for writing all this up concisely, because I think this will be very informative for people trying to design those new formats and thinking about how feedback and reliability and recovery work, because it helps to really distill what is needed for immediate application. So people that are reviewing those new protocols should review Colin's draft in parallel and understand what's missing in the current transport drafts.
Yeah, and there's a companion draft which is in RMCAT, which needs work, which talks about the feedback rates and the overheads of the different feedback rates, and so on, which may be of interest to people as well.
So,
And now this is finished, that it would make sense to update that one because it depends on the details of this format.
so Mo, do you think we should actually? Does that mean we should actually send this last call to other working groups, or just hope they're paying attention to RMCAT and ABT?
I would greatly doubt that those other groups are paying attention to something like this because media is kind of wort on their side right now. So it wouldn't hurt to ask them to consider it, but I think specifically if you ask the quick folks that are working on the recovery draft to take a look at this, because recovery mechanisms and reliability mechanisms and acknowledgments and things like that are critical for media, and they should understand why and how they're critical for media, which this draft lays out.
Yeah, but I think that's more as for information. Here is something we believe we need for doing media, and you may wish to consider it in your design decisions, rather than we want to change it based on what they're doing in that group.
They're using it. They're providing this information in the ACK frame. So I look at it. It looks similar. I mean, in terms of at least the information, it looks similar. I mean, you can say, but it was mentioned to them that there's similar work in RMCAT for a long time already.
I mean, as I understand it, in the current quick formats, this is speaking entirely as an individual and a somewhat uninformed one, the current quick ACK formats do not actually have arrival timestamps. Just
they were removed.
They were
there.
Yeah.
They were removed.
So I mean, which implies just the counters, not the timestamp. So it might be something that we would need to ask them to, or not we, but media people would need to ask them to put back sometime in the future for media. But
Yes.
that's not this working group's problem directly.
Yeah, and worse than the timestamps, there's also things like recommendations that things should not be ACKed, or should be delayed or something, which would hose media congestion controllers.
Yeah, we're pretty delayed acts with this as well sometimes. Yeah, we're not suggesting you ACK every packet with this. We're suggesting you ACK every frame or every couple of frames.
Hi, Jahed. Well, I do like this idea of educating others, like what do we need for media and stuff like that. But sharing this to this last call to multiple working group I would like to make that decision based on what exactly this working group would like to get this input from. If you share it to some other working group and they says, oh, you need to do this change and all these impacts, is this working group willing to take those? From quick working group coming okay, you need to change this and that. Rather than I think it should be a working last call in ABT, RMCAT, and an informational saying guys, we're happening, but we're make a specific this is for your information only.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or even potentially once it's published, rather than.
Yeah, we want
I
this
think that would be a good idea.
Yeah. All right, so that sounds reasonable.
I mostly agree with Jared, but there's a few things that are we don't want conflicts between the areas. I think that the quick stuff says IW10 everywhere basically. I forget, Colin, whether or not your draft says IW10 is okay.
This draft says nothing about congestion control whatsoever. It's just feedback. There are a bunch of proposals there are a bunch of congestion control candidates in our MCATs, but that's a different group, and most of them are RFCs already.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think we should be okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing would be if they say, oh no, millisecond level timing is not nearly good enough. We'd need, microsecond timing or something like that. But even that seems pretty marginal.
Yeah.
So my inclination would be to say.
My suggestion would be that we last call this here, inform our MCAT that the last call is happening since it came out of that and directly relates to that group, and then we're done.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Colin.
Okay, good. BVC, I guess. So F5, whatever the button there above that one, yeah. And then is that? So let's. Oh no, this one I think. There we are. Yeah, if you can have that. If you want words.
Shui Zhou from Changsheng. not sure if IETF has RFCs for how to throw mercy to first-time IETF presenters. If we do, please do follow. If we don't, please ask question using your own discretion. We are doing this BBC H26, whatever you like to talk payload format. Just really brief introductions. What is BBC? I think it's just make some of the key points. It's one of the hybrid video codecs similar to BBC, GVC, and targets finalization. The first version, which is July 2020. It's similar, has the picture segmentation mechanism support M2 size matching, prioritization, application-driven tiling, similar like HEVC. So similar to EV1, BBC has supported all kinds of the scalability, temporal, spatial, and SNR. It's also adapted the similar parameter set concept and non-header concept similar to all these hybrid codecs. So our approach to BBC payload format design is really started from the 7798. Most base quality is widely deployed and generally works, right? Even though there are some still open issues and some of the stuff which is not excised at all, but that's our starting point. Also adapted to the change of the non-header. Our current first draft doesn't reflect the newest change. But we will update once the general meeting in GVAT 2020. So our design principle is really trying to remove as much complexity as we can. Based on our studies, a lot of things in 7798 is not applicable at all, right? So that's the way we're trying to go for with a cleaner design. So our first step is also trying to deal with this transport layer first, right? And all the signal and something will come last. It's not because we forgot it, but we'll do that later. So we targeted this thing right after BBC first version, which is next 2020 after July, November-ish. So that's pretty much the overview of the BBC. If any questions, so just move forward.
So I understand currently we're just putting the work. It's still time until we have to do it because you're waiting for the final revision.
Yes.
And another question, will there be a reference in any of the VVC or H266 to the RTP payload format? Because in the past they needed the RFC number. It was like a situation. Is there some reference there? Will there be a reference to the... It's just for procedural.
So the ITU system layer standards are pretty much dead. So I don't expect that the dependency we had in the past to 323 and things like that will be an issue here. We're not under time pressure, not under artificial time pressure. There is discussion over in 3GPP SA4 or there's actually a work item that they want to perhaps reference that, and they would need it, but.
But that's not for the codec itself. It's just for the reference, the codec and the.
I'm talking about the reference to the RTP payload format. Yeah. So in SA4, they may need that at some point, but let's not worry about that one. I think on this one, we are not in a brutal rush, not like in the past.
Good. All right. So this is the overview with the open issues we have identified so far. I have a separate slide for each of them, so I'm just quickly go through what we are concerning the open issues. The first one is really concerning, not concerning, it's something we need to discuss the transport mode, MRST and MRMT. Then the second is really discussion what we need for the Parquet package anymore in VVC, which is defined in the 7798. The third one is really see if we need this interleaving support coming from this Dolly-based signaling for the interleaving supporting from 7798. The last one, we were hoping we can leave it to chairs if we can adapt this working group draft and move forward. So the first one is the support is a need for the MRST and MRMT. So SRST is simple, everybody knows it, and then it's widely deployed. So it's the second one is MRST. For those of you who don't know what it is really carrying multiple RTP streams over a single transport. The existing 7798 don't have any signaling, STB signaling at all, so there's a long history way back, so that's even longer than I participant standard, so I will leave that out. But that actually essentially make the STP signaling for MRST unusable in IETF context, right? But in the RTP, in the RTC web group, we have a source SRC multiplexing uses already, but we're still uncertain if that's actually doable.
Bernard about Microsoft. MRST is not easily incorporated within WebRTC, either in the APIs or in the STP.
Right.
So I think the jury is out. The jury convicted it, and it's pretty much gone. And same with
The jury's back. You're saying it's not out.
What?
The jury is not out.
The jury's back.
The jury's back. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Good to know. Okay. The last one is MRMT. So as far as we know, that's actually more like academic exercise at that point. We don't know. It's really supported the application-driven layered multicasting. So this, as Marta said, MRST has never been implemented and whatever. So so the question is really, I guess we don't have to ask this question anymore, right? So should we remove? I guess now. Yeah. No.
Does anybody have any desire for any of the multi-stream?
For the first question.
No.
Mosinati, I think we can safely omit MRMT. I don't believe anyone is interested in that. I grapple and forget about what the complications are with MRST. I remember the motivations were clear that you could more seamlessly detect losses and things like that because you have separation of the layers and therefore you have sequence numbering independent for all of those layers. But I suppose that with something like frame marking, maybe the ambiguities that you get with SRST aren't as bad as they used to be. But I don't recall completely shutting the door on MRST. I'm for simplicity. I'm for eliminating as many modes as we can. I just wonder whether there's anybody who's actually thought about, are people actually already doing MRST and don't even realize? Like certainly simulcast is going across different RTP streams, right? Nobody's bundling all the simulcast streams into one RTP stream.
So, I mean, Bernard about Microsoft, we implemented MRST for H.264. And one of the arguments is you don't have to rewrite this sequence numbers. So there's a little bit of efficiency there, but a lot of complexity that you get out of doing it. So I am not aware of anybody doing that with HEVC. It is done with H.264, but...
Stay on mic, please.
No, that's also our research. So I didn't see it.
So Stefan Weger, if someone is doing it with H.265 with HEVC, then they are doing it not in compliance with 7798, at least not in full compliance. The reason is that the signaling defined in 7798 does not support MRST. And there's actually a comment to that regard in 7798. Yeah. So this is an area that was underspecified because we wanted to ship this thing out of the door at the time for external dependencies that were good and valid, or were thought to be good and valid at the time. So we left that open. We had references, informative references to drafts and stuff in there. In the hope that someone gets an act together once certain drafts from that were kind of clocked over in RTC web, once those drafts were done, that someone would get the act together and do a BIS or something. No one ever had the energy. No one cared. Yeah, that's not only because of the success or lack thereof of HEVC in the video conferencing business, but also no one cared, right? No one cared. And I hate to have stale text. But read what question 1 says. Should we do it now? Should we wait for a companion document to do it later if anyone cares? Or should we possibly do the same thing that we did with 7798 and do it in a BIS? And both later options are something which I'm kind of, maybe. The first one, I just say no, we shouldn't, right? Oh, Bernard is always.
I mean, VP9, we made the decision not to support any of the multi-stream modes, and nobody wants them. So, yeah, I mean,
That's an easy question.
So I guess, as a chair, does anybody actually want to do the work for multi-stream modes? That sounds like no. We should.
Yep. Great. All right. So MRMT is out of question, right? So we remove that, and then the last one. So the fourth one is also gone. All right. So a need for Pucky, right? The history. So I don't want to go through the history again. So one of the uses of the Pucky extension is really for temporal structuring and signaling. There are actually no other usage we have identified. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we would like to hear if there's any other usage for the Pucky.
Not a role, Microsoft. So this one is a little bit different. I do understand the argument that some kind of RTP extension is likely to be the way that that SFUs operate generically, but the thing is, there are situations in which SFUs will parse the bit stream, and kind of prohibiting that from working, basically requiring you to negotiate an RTP extension to function doesn't seem quite right to me. And there are also other things in here, I would say, that can be supported as part of this that may be valuable, things like layer drop indications. Again, you could put it in the RTP extension, but it isn't in frame marking. And so, if you remove it from here, there'll be implications, I think, in some scenarios.
Okay, Stefan Wenger responding to this. So my main point is, and I think that's here said as well, the right spot to put information SFUs would typically need to do something smart to a scalable bit stream, I think, is not the payload header, because the payload header is encrypted. The right spot is in an extension to the frame marking draft, right, where that thing is not encrypted, right? So the scope of that thing is only the payload format. And so far, so I mean, we can volunteer. Please ship this darn frame marking draft yesterday, right? So let's get that thing out of the door. But I officially volunteer here to think about an extension mechanism of the frame marking draft for generic stuff where we can possibly make AV2 happy, if not AV1, where we can possibly put this type of stuff in. But throwing in a generic extension mechanism of the payload header when we don't have a single use case that makes sense in today's world where media is supposed to be encrypted, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Just to say that at least the frame marking has a section about future codec LID mapping, and it says they should be part of the new RTP payload format. That's what it says.
Okay. So in other words, we may want to have in here a section that says how to use the frame marking draft for the. Absolutely agreed. Thank you very much for reminding me. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. And we volunteer to do some work there. And hey, Jaco, are you online? Territory for you to grab. Work to do.
Next one. Yeah.
Jaco. He's muted. Okay. Jaco will probably do it. He volunteered to do some work there. He wants to be involved. So yeah. Jaco can do it.
One final point on that. Thank you, Stefan, for bringing that up. distinction between having things in payload headers versus RTP headers. I'd like to reiterate that in the new transport work, all of this stuff is going in an encrypted, basically, tunnel. And so we would lose the ability to have authenticated but not encrypted data as RTP headers are today. So people that care about that should probably review the specs and figure out if that's something that's really necessary for designs or not, and how to solve it if it is.
You playing games on there? Okay.
Hello. So I think Mo has right in that direction, but I would think that the model more like what Perk has is actually what we're discussing, is that yes, you're going to have an outer encrypted layer between the nodes in a centralized conferencing structure and things like that. So what we're really talking is maybe more like in Perk, how do you expose the information when you have the payload being encrypted? And then I mean really the media payloads. And I think if I remember Perk correctly, that would mean that the payload part of RTP Skybeak is end-to-end encrypted while not the header extension. So it's still in this working group context. I think that's the right way of thinking about this. But I wouldn't see a need for necessarily doing this in the base spec for this payload format.
I agree with Magnus that the highest runner case is media nodes being able to access this, but I think one of the other motivations for having RTP headers in the clear was not necessarily a conference bridge, but even on-path elements to be able to see and do things intelligently with this. And of course, you'd lose that ability with, Perk doesn't allow the on-path elements to see, anything about the header extensions if it's going purely over DTLS and not over RTP, not over DTLS RTP. If it's going over real DTLS, you would lose all of that visibility.
Yeah.
So it's really like you need some proxy there in the middle for doing that.
That's not, and none of this is in this working group scope. So it's just, if you join the whatever RIP becomes mailing list, make sure that discuss it there.
So I have two comments. One comment is that the typical lifetime of a video codec is about 10 years. We'll see whether we see initial deployment of all this modern stuff that more sites within the lifetime of this codec. Yeah, I mean, come on, we are not the fastest organization on the planet here. That's number one. Number two, and that's probably even more important, the argument. The key argument for all this encryption stuff is, one of the key arguments for the frame marking draft has been, as far as I understand it, that the middle box that sits there in the middle of the network and is operated by someone else who is not supposed to see the traffic itself can act on it. Now, when you have some super fancy new transport, then you don't have to worry about the transport from your, say, sending endpoint to that middle box, and you don't have to worry about the traffic from the middle box to the receiving endpoint. But you still have to worry, you still need to have some stuff that's on one hand encrypted so that the middle box can't see, say, the video signal, the compressed video signal, but on the other hand, it has to see some control information like this, right? So just putting them in all in the same kind of giant bucket, it's either encrypted or not, in that scenario is wrong. Yeah.
So I think what we take out of this is that we have to be, people who are interested in this work should follow what's happening in all this work that's trying to encrypt everything, which will prevent some.
We are not living under that rock, which Mo cited. We are not.
Because just as a reminder, I mean, at the time we tried to write a requirement for RTP under Quick to address, also to mention that there are issues with the RTP headers that are needed by the middle boxes, to see if we can address that.
Right. Just kind of summarize, I guess we are safe to say we are lean to frameworking based solution for now. Or can we discuss that?
I think your question 5 is the question you want an answer to, right? Generic payload header extension.
Right. So I have to
Yeah, I think there is value to that. I don't think it's has to be. It may be distinct from frame marking, but it's a generic.
No, I think he means payload header extension inside the payload format,
right.
as opposed to.
Oh, right.
That's
Okay.
what PAC is?
Yeah.
PAC
That's
is
a
basically
PH.
another null unit type, but
Right.
so we don't need this.
You don't need that.
Something like we need the definition of the framework.
Stefan, can you say it to the mic so we get it on the?
Yeah.
But I think we agree, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you?
I think the answer to question 5 is yes.
No.
You think it's no?
Yes.
Okay.
As formulated, the answer to question 5 is no, because I don't think we need to extend the payload header itself ever. However, there should be a question 5.5, which says, do we need a mapping of the mechanisms of the new VBC codec to the frame marking draft? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. And then there is a sub-question whether we need that in this document here. And the answer to that question is also a resounding yes. Good?
I think I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
We just. All right. Great. Okay. All right.
Good.
All right. So that will be the last ones. We're thinking about removing the downlink-based signaling for interleaving support. So that's a better trend for the better codecs such as AVC, GVC, and also VBC. That the codec itself is already good enough to less likelihood for the successful error concealment. That's also one of the questions raised by Yago, right? So the question is really, should we remove this downlink-based array signaling for clean messages, and do we even care in picture error resilience right now? No. Okay. I guess that's a yes. Right? Great. All right. So that's it.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Oh, and then the question is, does this group want to adopt this as a working group item? It's clearly in scope. Yeah. Anybody object? All right.
Thank you very much.
So
We'll confirm that on the list, but
First, we'll do a milestone. And then,
yeah, we'll do a mile.
so just for us for the milestone, what do you think we should have as a milestone date for that work?
So we'll do after the draft, right after January 2020, with the GVA meeting. So there's something, there's a new no header feature which is will not include on the first draft.
So make it end of 2020 for the milestone, with the understanding that rarely a milestone is hit in this organization.
Did you see TTML? They were ahead because they wanted to finish that. So that's dependent. Again, that's by the end. It depends
That's why I said rarely and not never.
That was exciting. So Gunnar, are you? Oh, yeah, he's there. Good, excellent. Hello. We see you. We're not sure we hear you yet. Can you talk? We do not hear you. No, Medico is doing it for us. They're paying attention. And we do not hear you still.
No.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
Okay. Hi. Good. So, is it my time?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I have submitted a draft about the real-time text media handling in multi-party conferences. I made it with music in the topic or in the name, but it really affects many groups. For example, Avtcore. Next, please. So what is real-time text? Some basic facts. It is to transmit text while you create it. So there is no special user action for sending it. That provides tight interaction between the participants. They don't need to wait for completed messages. It is required now in many places for accessibility reasons, but in fact it is useful for all to get more live text interaction. The presentation level is ITU-T T140, which is a simple standard based on UTF-8 transmission and ISO 6429 control codes. We have transport for it by RTP in RFC 4103, where you have some robustness by redundancy. And there is another draft for transport in WebRTC now, just in progress, where we have the robustness by the reliable type of data channel. It's specified in next generation emergency services, in 3GPP IMS, in regular SIP VoIP services, and in relay services. So, next slide, please. But the multi-party real-time text is not specified. It's mentioned in many specifications that we need to do multi-party, but it has never settled in any standard document. It has been said that, well, you use regular RTP mechanism, but we need to settle it so everybody knows what is the best way to do it. Therefore, the current user terminals only support two-party view of real-time text calls. Therefore, we need a capability negotiation for telling that we have a multi-party capable terminal, and we may need to tell which one. The other conference mechanisms are based on centralized servers, where we have said that we need RTT. So therefore, a centralized conference server mixing method is needed. So what we need to go from two-party to multi-party is that we need to identify the source of text. We need the receiver to separate text from different sources, and we shouldn't delay the text presentation. Should still have the flow. And since there are many implementations already out there doing two-party, we need to have a fallback method for mixing when you have a receiver that is not capable of sorting out the received streams into separate presentations, if possible. And there are a couple of different display types, display styles that we need to have the receiving app to select between. Which is seen in next slide. One way, which I think is becoming the most common, is to have a view like this, where you have labels in front of text chunks from different parties. And you see by the three lowest items here, you have people typing. So the text is growing from multiple parties, and when you have completed something that can be called a message, you let it flow up in the view. Next slide, we have another way of displaying real-time text, that is to have a column for each user and still place the text in some kind of relative time order. So lower text is later sent. Still, there is a requirement to not put every character exactly at the time it was displayed. It's a requirement to have chunks of text readable together. So there's a compromise between time display and readability. Next slide, please. The requirements we have is for the real-time, the multi-party view is that it should be applicable to a 3GPP for general SIP, for NG emergency services and relay services. It should not delay display. We have an old rule that display should happen not more than 500 milliseconds after sending. We also have a slight risk for text loss when we have redundancy use. So, and we have a standard saying how we should indicate that to the receiving user by mark in the stream, and we need to have that still available in mark. And we shall collect text from different users so that it's readable and the source is identified. We also support erasure, and that complicates the display for the multi-party case. You must not let it erase other parties' text, for example. We need to have support for security, and we should not have something that is too complicated. There is some urgency for getting this done, so implementable in near future with current implementations. And we need also to describe this fallback method for cases when we only have a two-party capable receiving terminal. Next slide.
Just a question for clarification.
Please.
Just a question for clarification. Do you need also...
Can I have next slide? So in the draft, I have had a draft a long time ago, which I revived now and added a lot of stuff in. So here we have, right now, it is formed as a kind of discussion paper because there are many alternative methods that we can select from for coordination of RTP-based RTT. And I've discussed them with pros and cons, and the same thing for WebRTC-based streams. And then there is a method presented for conference unaware devices. And since there are already implementations out, we need to have a method for capability negotiation for the multi-party. And there are a couple of methods to select from. We need to discuss how we identify the source. We have some presentation aspects. We have a discussion of robustness and the indication of loss and performance and security and IANA considerations. Next slide, please. So the goals now are to discuss the different alternative methods for stream mixing and source identification and agree on preferred methods and then make that clear in the draft. And same thing about the capability negotiation. How to describe that you have a party that is capable of this display and agree on preferred methods for that. And then make sure that we have a fallback method for unaware devices. Now, the draft touches topics of many working groups. It's for some RTP aspects, for Avtcore, it's negotiation for music. It might be something for Zipcore, I don't know. And so we need to arrange the discussions in a practical way. I want to take advice on that. Shall we have it in music, even if it touches AVT topics, or shall we distribute the discussions? That's a comment. And next slide, please. So here are examples from the draft, some discussion topic, how we coordinate RTP. It's different RTP methods, translator or mixer, or have source indication in the stream, or have a mesh of RTP endpoints, or even multiple RTP sessions. And we also have the discussion on the Confluence Unaware user agents, how we provide some sense of multi-party to them. Next slide, please. Another discussion topic in the draft is the capability negotiation, where I have identified 3 possibilities. One is to somehow make it implicit by saying that if you have a multi-party aware device declaring text in the stream, then it must be, of course, be multi-party aware also for the text, and then you can start sending multi-party contents to it. Another is to have a new zip media tag for declaring multi-party capability, and third one is to have an SDP media attribute. And there are pros and cons for these 3, and there might be other ways to indicate capability. Next slide, please. So, I think IETF is the right place to do this, because we have needs from different parties. We have NINA and we have 3GPP and others, and they all can refer to IETF. Currently, I think it's a best current practice document. It should be produced. Might be some small registration of negotiation that needs to be standards draft. And it is a bit urgent to get this ready. The urgency has been announced from NINA, who handle next generation emergency services. So at least early 2021, they want to see implementations running on this. And next slide, please. Which is the last. I look forward to rapid progress of this and hope that we can get discussions going. Thanks.
Thank you, Gunnar. Any question for clarification or anything from Gunnar? Okay, so I think we'll have to go and discuss with the AD where to progress it, because I'm not even sure if it's in MMusic, because it's like, it has aspects from SIP, like you said, from SIP, from MMusic, and some AVT. So typically we do it through dispatch, but then I'll consult with the AD about what to do, and we'll come back and say how we can progress it and whether it's what, and then we'll have to decide afterwards after we decide where it will be progress, then we'll have to decide, then there will be a decision whether it's 1 document, 2 document, or whatever. But first we have to find a home for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just started with music, but let's see what we can.
Part of the problem is where to do it depends on what solution we do, which makes it sort of a chicken and egg problem.
No, not really. It has topics for.
It has topics for a number of different areas, but
yeah.
So
we don't select area because of how we select
Yeah, no, it's
the solutions.
there's Barry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is Barry. I wasn't going to stand up yet because the chairs had the right idea. I think the AVT core chairs and the music chairs should chat first and then go from there. Taking a dispatch is a reasonable thing, but if there are two pretty clear working groups that it would go in one or the other, then we should work that out first. And if the answer is neither of them thinks the answer is clear, then we'll take it to dispatch. Or I'll chat with Adam about it and we'll see where we go. And Magnus obviously has something to say. So let's see what Magnus has to say.
So I actually have a question which I think defines part of the scope to Gunnar. Are you feeling that the multi-stream, multi-party solution is clear for this? That the current payload format and its usage for multi-party when you actually have multiple SSRCs and multiple RTP streams, is that clear enough in the specifications?
Sorry, you mean if we have
so if I mean
streams,
yeah, so I mean the classical, yeah, if I take the RTP model, the obvious multi-party model for real-time text is that each user that writes something has its own SSRC. The stream is forward the whole way to all receivers, and it becomes solely a question of how do you display these users as an implementation. Is that fully the right assumption here for what you would say be the right solution for updated users, etc., and that would be the right. And then it's the question of how do we deal with legacy implementations that's only expects one single SSRC when it deals with 340.
And sorry.
Yeah, my view is that would be the ideal solution theoretically, to have one SSRC in one RTP session, one SSRC per sending user, because then you can really identify where text was lost, for example. That is the main problem. If you merge it into one stream, to know who did we lose text from. But I don't want to complicate implementation, because multiple SSRC, multiple streams seems to be not supported by SDP. To have multiple SSRC streams in the same session.
Well, from RTP perspective, it's clear. I know the result is this: you get into whole bundle and multiple and all this. You get a lot of M lines and which is interesting in these cases where you have, I would say, larger groups of conferencing, etc. And that if you're using, and I think this is downside of the result of. So therefore, it's in some sense, an M-user question of the complications of using RTP as intended for this use case. Is with Plan B in SDP is that you get a lot of M lines if you have a large number of potential users.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But okay, thank you.
Magnus, while you're there, do you have a thought on? Okay, Magnus is going away. Do you have a thought on where it belongs?
He's back.
I mean, this is tough, I think, because some of these solutions to this legacy problem is in the space that you're actually modifying the internal of the text formats, and the rest is very much signaling, I think, for dealing with it, etc. So it's I think there's a large part which is probably more in the music country. And then you have this specific media, how to deal with media, and that's section. And it might be that it's small enough and it's not really changing the RTP stuff anyway. So it's something that you could include in a music document and just say, okay, here is our recommendation, and cross working groups call it. But that's assuming one set of implementations, I think, or how to deal with the legacy cases.
I think it has
Yeah.
to do.
For M-Music, it's mainly the negotiation, capability negotiation, which way to go with that. Shall we add a SDP attribute, or is it good with a zip media tag?
Hello, Strong. Just a word of warning. This is a generic multi-party chat service. We have a long and glorious history of ignoble failures in this area, starting with IRC, going through XMPP and various other efforts. The fact that this particular iteration tries to reuse SDP and RPP is more or less an implementation accident, that you will have all the problems of multi-party chats. And you might want to take a step back, or you might want to shut down the scope of use so that it's okay to pursue a point solution that you can get to quickly because you don't consider either other requirements or other technologies. But this is multi-party chat. It will have all the problems of multi-party chat.
So I think, Harold, that's a good point. That's what I was trying to say, that it depends on, you have multiple solution architecture in the document, and we have to figure out which one will be simple to implement and to start with that. Because I assume maybe you have a conference and a conference server like an MCU that does that may make it simple because the signaling will be simple because it's like a point-to-point with handling all the mechanism we have today to do multi-point conferencing, like the focus, the one that we're defining in SIP. So it's better to look at all each cases and try to analyze what is needed to implement these cases, whether it's already supported, and we can do it very simply.
Yeah, that's the intention.
I agree with Harold, and I was thinking, what I wanted to ask as a clarifying question is, in all of these deployments, are they really just purely nothing but text, or are you sometimes trying to mix the text with other media? That would be the only rationale that I could see why you would go to any kind of RTP-ish solution. If it's purely text in all these deployments and no other media type, I think RTP and SDP are a hack. It's an accident. Worse than an accident. It's a giant mistake.
I can respond. Yes, most common is the combination of video, audio, and real-time text, so that you can select any of the real-time media you might want to use. There are also audio and real-time text implementations in 3GPP, and that is what is required in the States, at least.
The document,
so that
the document mentioned video and closed captions as part of that. So the text appears, so the audio appears as closed caption.
Yeah, but this is real-time text. You see it flows as you type.
Yeah.
And this is
caption is to.
This is Barry. I also want you not to forget MLS,
yes,
which is going on in the security area right now. So there's,
Bernardo, Microsoft, clarifying question. I believe this is part of the next-gen 911 architecture, is it not? Because as I recall, right, you can have real-time text and audio and video, and it can be conferenced. That's how the recording works, kind of over a conferencing. So it can include both audio and video.
And John, as I understand it, a lot of the implementer community that needs this is participating in RUM. Is that correct? So we probably should make sure that RUM is in the loop for this.
That's kind of a distinct but related scenario. It may be the VRS, or it may just be a 911 call with audio and video.
But I mean, I guess the point is, I guess the RU, the relay user equipment is probably also often going to be used for real-time text. And one of the use cases you need is a conference real-time text from a RU to a PSAP.
Yeah, that should be.
Yeah.
Yes, and in that situation, it is because the PSAP want to conference in next party in the call. First, the PSAP handles the call, and then they want to link in another person, but still be on the call, and therefore it is a conference call, a simple three-party call in most cases. And the user part might be a mobile terminal.
So
with IMS.
Yeah. So I guess yes. I mean, which I guess that my point there is that what solution spaces are likely to be easy for that community depends. So it affects what we choose to do.
Yes.
But yeah. So I think it does sort of seem like people are feeling this is more in the scope of M-Music than here. So, I mean, we should presumably talk to...
M-Music didn't meet this time that we have to talk. I didn't see them. I mean, I didn't see the chairs.
Yeah, the chairs are Bo Berman and Fleming Andreessen.
Fleming is not here.
I'm pretty sure he's not, and I haven't seen Bo around, but I don't know whether he's here.
Bo is not here also, yeah. So both of them are not here, so we'll have to do it some... Magnus can talk with me. So, okay. We'll connect also with the M-Music chairs, and I think that the good thing, what you need to be done is to try to focus on what solution you really think will be the best fit for being able to progress it faster, and we try to see how to do that.
Both from a standardization point of view and from something the implementation community can do without too much pain.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good summary.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. So I think by this we finished the agenda for today.
Anybody have any other business they wanted to bring up today? Otherwise, it's the last session of the IETF. So unless you're an AD, welcome to the end of the IETF. Otherwise. And see you all in Vancouver.
Travel safely. Drive safe. Be careful out there. See you later. Are you going to go to the...